Welcome to the award-winning SuperHuman Academy podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to give you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
Hey, listen up and don't skip over this. Before we get started, I want to let you know that I am giving away completely free copies of my latest best-selling book, The Only Skill That Matters. This book is going to teach you how to upgrade your memory, read faster, learn more, and conquer your dreams. And it contains all new content written for 2020. Now, again, I am giving away completely free copies of this book. All you need to do is pay shipping and handling. So to pick up your free copy as a listener of this podcast, visit freelearningbook.com. That's freelearningbook.com. Greetings, super friends, and welcome to this week's episode where we are joined by Dr. Vincent Pedre, a functional medicine certified doctor and author of the best-selling book, Happy Gut. Now, I wanted to have Dr. Pedre on the show today, not because we haven't talked about gut health in the past, we have, but because I wanted to understand the link between gut health and, wait for it, immunity. I know immunity is so important to a lot of us right now as we're recording this. We are in the middle of a pandemic, and I know that is not going to go away anytime soon. This is going to be something that we all need to worry about, and we all need to be improving our immunity in the next few months and maybe even years. So I wanted to understand, what is the connection between the microbiome, something that we've talked about with regards to mood, with regards to obesity, with regards to overall health, and try to figure out how is it related to your overall immunity. And it turns out it's very related. And I think you're going to learn quite a bit in this episode. I certainly did. So please enjoy this conversation with Dr. Vincent Pedre. Dr. Vincent Pedre, how are you, my friend? Welcome to the show.
Doing great. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you here. Gut health, I think, is a really important topic, and especially immunity right now. I mean, we're recording this in May, so I'm trying to make sure that all the content we're putting out, because who knows when all this is going to end, is relevant to people in their new realities. So I feel like it's a real blessing that we managed to get connected.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have to be thinking immunity for quite a while. And since I look at things from the perspective of the gut, I like to say that the gut is the gateway to your immune system.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get into that, though, Dr. Pedre, I want to ask, how did you come down this path? What's kind of your superhero origin story? And I ask because I always find that people in our position, in the position of serving, we often have a really good reason why we went down this path. There's often a pretty good story. So I wanted to ask you about your origin story and how you became a functional medicine doctor and how you became so fascinated with gut health and immunity.
Yeah, well, I think I'll go kind of the more Eagles view first. I became a functional medicine doctor because I've always been a truth seeker, and it's plain and simple. I always wanted to learn what is the true underlying cause for why people suffer from conditions. And I was just not satisfied by treating symptoms, which is a lot of the Western model is giving medications for symptoms. And I just intuitively, maybe because I grew up in a family where supplements were used quite often, and nutrition was kind of in the periphery of, you can, there wasn't a lot of knowledge growing up with that, but my father was very much into trying to learn and understand how nutrition could be used to heal the body. So I grew up in that atmosphere, even though we didn't always eat healthy. And that goes into my origin story because, looking back, I was my first gut patient. I had been on multiple rounds of antibiotics as a teenager. The pediatrician would say that my immune system was weak, that I needed to be on a multivitamin, that I wasn't eating enough. Once I went through my growth spurt, I became very thin and I could never put on weight. But I had been on round after round of antibiotics. And I mean like 3-4 rounds of antibiotics per year. Sometimes even had to go and get a gamma globulin shot, which is pooled immunoglobulins. Like this is early 80s. Like thank God that I was never exposed to HIV because they weren't checking for that back then. But they did it because my immune system was weak. And every time I got, when I had an extended infection and I was on antibiotics and I wasn't responding, the gamma globulin shot would just felt like it was a rescue for me. And I would feel so much better after that. Now, little did I know, and now I can look back and tell you that the extensive rounds of antibiotics destroyed my gut microbiome. That dysbiosis imbalance between good and bad bacteria that developed then led to leaky gut. The leaky gut led to me becoming sensitive to wheat and dairy, the two primary food groups that were in my diet as a teenager. And most teenagers, like I remember my mom taking me to a fast food restaurant after school every day to pick up a vanilla milkshake. And that was like my favorite part of the day, is getting that vanilla milkshake. But little did I know that milkshake was part of the reason that my immune system was so suppressed. It was overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so part of my desire as a teenager was I just wanted to hack, how can I not get sick? Because I was the one that if someone was in the room and they coughed, I was going to pick up what they had. I always had a sore throat. You know, it was always kind of, you could say I was a bit of a hypochondriac. And so I was initially inspired by a quest to figure out, well, how can I get less sick? How can I avoid picking up, what can I do to be healthier? And granted, I was a teenager trying to figure this out. So I didn't quite make the connection with diet yet until I got to medical school. And it was accidental in a sense that I had stopped consuming as much dairy because of the medical student schedule, getting up really early in the morning, having to rush to school, long days. Dairy just didn't become a part of my diet as predominantly as before. So I wasn't having cereal with milk in the morning because I just couldn't sit in the apartment. I had to rush out the door. And immediately I noticed that I wasn't getting sick as often. And that was my first aha, because we weren't being taught nutrition in medical school, but I was always nutrition aware, even though I didn't have a lot of knowledge around it. I was, I guess you could say I was nutrition curious as to, is there a way to eat that could make me healthier? Around that time, I also started incorporating more healthy fats into my diet. I started eating avocados, more olive oil. Going back, I was a child of the 80s. So back in the 80s with two older sisters, especially my older sister, obsessed with weight. And we were raised during the fat is the villain era, back. I don't know if you remember that from the 80s. But
I do.
and you remember all the fat-free cookies and all, and you think like, okay, fat's the villain, so a fat-free cookie is good for you. But it was loaded with sugar, So we were raised. I grew up in a time when there was a lot of misinformation around what is the right diet. So it took a lot of trial and error on my part to slowly figure it out. And I was on a quest. But there was a point there was a period when I just kind of resigned myself that this was my normal, that I would have a very sensitive digestive system, that I didn't know how it was going to react when I ate out, whatever that was. And it wasn't until going back to the beginning and saying that I'm a truth seeker. So when I finished my training, I was looking for, and this was after medical school and after residency training in New York in a very evidence-based program in internal medicine, where they fed us Coke and pizza for lunch when we had a lunchtime lecture. So, you go figure, because now looking back, I'd be like, this is horrific. Like you're feeding us the worst food you could feed us when we're exhausted and you're feeding us food that is inflammatory to our bodies. So, but I was a truth seeker, and I was always looking for what else could explain and help me understand body physiology better. And when I discovered functional medicine, I went back and understood what had happened to me and started learning about the gut microbiome and started thinking about all the antibiotics that I had been on as a child. Yes. Yeah, I mean, course after course. I mean, I know at some point I was on Cipro, which is a fluoroquinolone that has been shown to destroy the gut microbiome, and it takes about 12 months to recover from that. Insane. Now, if you remember, I told you I was on 3 courses of antibiotics per year, so there was never any time for recovery. My gut microbiome was right. Shot.
What was the cause of all the antibiotics, by the way? Why did they have you?
I was getting pharyngitis, so throat infections, sinusitis, pneumonia, bronchitis. But I mean, what was the true cause was the belief system of the doctors who were prescribing these medications, thinking that this is the right way to treat infections, but they were just weakening me and making me more prone to infection.
Right. I mean, I can relate on some level. I was on antibiotics for acne for years and years and years and years until eventually, one doctor finally said, Accutane's pretty bad, but it's not as bad as what we're doing to your body with all these antibiotics. And yeah, I mean, to this day, I don't think I have as healthy of a microbiome, though I very actively, and we can get into this later, I actively cultivate my microbiome, and I do a lot of things to take care of it, but I'm excited to learn about more. So tell me, because functional medicine is a very wide field, and I've continually been impressed. I work with a functional medicine doctor who's been on the show before as well, so I'm pretty familiar. Tell me about the link between the gut and immunity, because I think we know on the show, we've talked about digestion and obviously nutrition. That's a giveaway. Digestion and the microbiome and energy, digestion and all different kinds of things. Even we've talked to some extent about mood and how the health of your microbiome, your gut, can affect whether or not you have depression. We haven't really talked about the effects with immunity, and I want to understand that connection a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, we know that 70% of the immune system lies all along the lining of the gut. And it's basically our border patrol looking at everything that comes through, checking it out, seeing if it's friend or foe. Now, when you have a disruption in the gut microbiome because you've been on antibiotics, you've been exposed to pesticides, maybe you've taken medications that increase the permeability of the gut. So we talk about leaky gut. I mentioned that. Think of the gut as a coffee filter. If it's working properly, the only thing that comes through on the other side is the dark water that's been, infused with the coffee essence. But if that coffee filter had tiny holes in it, then you're going to get coffee grounds coming through. And that's kind of similar idea with a leaky gut. It's the connections between the cells, which are Velcro-like, and we call them tight junctions, loosen up. And so there's a little bit of a space between the cells that can allow bigger molecules that would not get through to get through. And some of those could be partially digested proteins. So it could be like a piece of wheat that got through, or a gluten molecule. And some of it could be from bacteria, gram-negative bacteria in the large intestine, which have something on their outer coat called endotoxin or lipopolysaccharide. And that is one of the biggest instigators of the immune system. So basically, if your immune system is fighting a war along your gut border because the gut border has become leaky, then it becomes harder for your immune system to recognize when there is a virus coming in through the airway and to be able to protect you effectively. So it's kind of a concept of you can't fight a war in 2 fronts at the same time. It's difficult for your immune system. And your immune system also gets scrambled because if your gut is leaky through all these different mechanisms, we can talk more about that, then your immune system is going to be on hyper alert. Mm-hmm. And the body is all about balance. So immunity is about the ability to mount an immune response that is appropriate, but also the ability to shut down that immune response when it's done what was needed, and shut it down before it starts damaging your own body.
Right. So if I'm understanding correctly, it's not only, or maybe it is, largely it's this filtration of so much comes into our body through our gut, and it needs to be able to filter as well. You also said, I think it was 70% of our immune system involves our gut. Does that mean that we're actually activating white blood cells through an interaction?
Yeah, we have all types of white blood cells there. There's an area. So the gut lining itself is one cell layer thick, which is pretty amazing. And on the other side is something called the lamina propria. And think of it, I kind of think of it as the neutral zone, let's say between two countries, if there was a border and there's a neutral zone. And that's where some certain types of white blood cells, like dendritic cells, tend to hang out there. And they're kind of gobbling up the things that come through and figuring out, okay, this is friend, this is not friend. Piece of that donut that you ate that's not fully digested, and they're like, I don't recognize this. And they can treat these molecules as if they are a bacteria. I mean, Alessio Fasano, who's done a lot of research on gluten, said that the body basically looks at gluten as if it was a bacteria and sets up an immune response in the same way that it would if you were being attacked by a bug.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. And so I think it's pretty clear to all of us, if not for the immunity, then all the other million reasons, that we've talked about on the show before for improving our gut health. Now,
yeah, and I want to say, like in the beginning, I was saying how I got sick all the time as a teenager. Like I was sick every couple of months, every 2 to 3 months. And now as an adult that knows how to take care of my gut microbiome and take care of my gut border, I don't get sick that often.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I can definitely relate. So what are the things we can do? I mean, we'll spare the obvious ones, right? Eating tons of wheat and gluten and garbage that's going to destroy our gut, that's an automatic no. But what are the things we can do that are less obvious to be improving our gut health and therefore improving our microbiome?
Yeah, of course. Starting with vegetables, prebiotics, Jerusalem artichoke, dandelion greens, garlic, onions, if you can tolerate them. People who have a FODMAP issue a lot of times are very sensitive to garlic and onions, make them very gassy. Chicory root. So there's a lot of what we call prebiotic fibers in foods that feed the good gut microbiome. So that's number one. The other way is to take in fermented foods. So it could be sauerkraut, it could be a fermented drink. There's all different types of fermented foods that you can incorporate into your diet that can help enhance and improve the gut microbiome. Of course, you can supplement with probiotics, but even just starting there with the basics, with the right diet. The other thing is, if you are open to it, bone broth has a lot of healing factors that are really great for the gut lining. I know people who are vegetarian might feel averse to that, but bone broth has a lot of amazing healing factors that come from the slow cooking from the bones that activate the immune system, keep your gut lining healthy, and it can be rich in minerals, which is also really good for the body.
Right. I've got a ton of bone broth in my freezer as we speak of different batches. I've got some chicken and beef, and I actually make it myself because it's pretty good fun to play with. So I have a lot of questions about what you said because I like to go deep. I always worry on the topic of prebiotics. I always worry, the whole name of the game, as I understand it, with the gut microbiome is diversity. And so if I really like, my Jerusalem artichoke and my onions, and that's kind of my base, like I worry about getting the same bacteria and allowing it to overpopulate. How important is wide diversity? Or are we really only talking about, the same 10 or 20 bacteria that appear in all these different prebiotic rich foods?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about that is that, there's a lot of symbiosis that is happening, not just between us and the bacteria in the gut, but also between the bacteria that live in the gut. And some of that symbiosis is that bacteria may produce a metabolic byproduct that then feeds another strain of bacteria or another species of bacteria. So that in itself is quite fascinating. But I was just in Africa, and I went with a group that had the opportunity to stay with the Hadza people who are among the last hunter-gatherers on the planet. And there's still a small group of them, probably around 250 or so, that are still living in their ancestral, traditional way, hunting, gathering, and foraging in the forest. And what's really fascinating about them is they've done studies looking at their gut microbiome and compared it to a group of Italians as controls. And what the Italian diet is, or the Western diet, is quite varied. There's going to be a lot of different types of foods, whereas the Hadza are eating tubers, wild honey, berries, small to medium-sized animals, sometimes a bigger game animal, depending on what they can hunt. And that's pretty much it. And they have a more diverse gut microbiome than the Italian comparison, which you can imagine is eating a huge variety of vegetables and tomatoes and all that stuff. And I think it's something quite fascinating to point out, because the difference is the Hadza are living out in the wild also. Right. They're eating a lot of tubers. So tubers are extremely, like cassava, like root vegetables, kind of not quite like potatoes, but when I was out there, actually, we went foraging in the forest and we dug up a root vegetable and then cut it and ate it right there out in the forest.
Dirt and everything.
Dirt and everything, and which may have not been so bad. That's another story. Well, which may have not been, a good thing for me because I ended up with a parasite. But then there's this whole concept of it being exposed to dirt and nature that increases the diversity of the bacteria that live in the gut.
Yep.
And I think that's a really important piece of it as well, because we live in modern society and this antiseptic world where we're trying to be antibacterial, and that's not necessarily the best thing for us.
Totally.
That's not how we evolved.
Totally. And I want to ask you about that because, we've talked on the show before and talked about how, you shouldn't sterilize your food. And yet, right now we're in a position where my wife and I do sterilize everything that comes in the door, at least if it's been in a supermarket where 100 other people have picked up the avocado to see if it's ripe. We bought like a food safe kind of disinfectant that we're spraying our vegetables with, which I know is killing all the bacteria. But in normal times and then in these crazy times, coronavirus times, how if we're shopping through the normal industrial food system, like how can we make sure we're not over sanitizing our food, or is it too late and we should all, as my wife and I just did, start our own gardens?
Yeah, I think that out of this, a lot of people would think of growing their own vegetables, even if like an indoor hydroponic garden, or just starting your own garden, or even just My favorite thing to do, and I can tell you, because year round you can't do this, but once it's spring and summer and early fall, shopping from farmers markets and getting fresh produce from an organic farmer that like you can speak with them and ask them, how do you grow your vegetables? What do you do? I never find produce that is better than from an organic farmer directly from them, unless you're growing it yourself.
Yeah. And this raises such a great question as well, Dr. Pedre, because I think a lot of people, they hear organic and they think of California, armpit hair, Berkeley hippies, like myself, by the way. But they think of those kinds of people and they think like, oh, non-GMO. It's actually not about that. And I'll tell a story. My wife and I decided to plant potatoes on our balcony because who knows how bad this whole coronavirus thing is going to get, but apparently not bad enough to interrupt food systems. So we said, it's a good idea to plant our own food and have, again, this wonderful source of bacteria and everything. And we're composting. And we tried planting store-bought potatoes and they have, it turns out, chemicals on them which prevent them from actually sprouting. And then we bought some from a farmer delivery service and they sprouted in a couple of days. And that's just, the tip of the iceberg, because in reality, you also got to ask what's the nutrient content. Forget, again, I'm not convinced about the GMO, non-GMO. I think if they want to genetically engineer a tomato to, have a thicker skin so it transports better, that doesn't bother me. I'm not a scientist, but what does bother me is what have they used to fertilize the soil, and what kind of things are they using to take off the stuff that I want, which is bacteria.
Yeah, and there is very common, one of the types of genetically modified potatoes is called a BT potato. And the BT stands for Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a bacteria that grows in the soil and it produces a toxin that acts as a pesticide. And the way it works is if an insect tries to eat the potato, that toxin pokes holes in the insect's gut and the insect dies.
Wow.
Well, the interesting thing is that toxin can also do the same to human gut and cause leakiness in the gut. So I do think that depending on the type of genetically modified crop, that it can be damaging either directly to people, or if it's genetically modified to withstand pesticide. What they found is that farmers will spray 6 times the amount of pesticide on a genetically modified crop, like a Roundup Ready corn or soy, than they would otherwise, because the crop can withstand it. And the crazy thing is that, and I think the soil is, we talk about diversity, 25% of the Earth's biodiversity is found in the soil. And we are destroying our soil through these monoculture farming practices. And what they found that fields that are sprayed with glyphosate, which is one of these culprit pesticides, you basically get I was talking about dysbiosis of the gut. Well, you get a dysbiosis of the soil. So an imbalance of bacteria, and you start seeing unfavorable bacteria growing in the soil, which are not friendly to plants. So, yeah, I mean, it's a big conversation, because I think what we do to the outside world, eventually we're doing to ourselves.
All right, let's take a quick pause and thank this episode's sponsor, BlueBlox blue light blocking glasses, the only blue light blocking company in the world that create evidence-backed lenses for filtering blue and green light. Their Australian lab-built lens technology is fitted into the most fashionable frames, and they can even make prescription and reading glasses in their optics lab. So whether you want to wear their Sleep Plus glasses that block 100% of blue and green light, their Summer Glow mood booster glasses, or even blue light computer glasses that don't have a yellow tint, BlueBlox has you covered. Now, I like to wear the Sleep Plus glasses 2 to 3 hours before bed, and they really, really help your sleep. I also like to wear the daytime ones for reducing digital eye strain, headaches, and lowering stress. Now, BlueBlox has free and fast worldwide shipping, and if you use code SuperHuman at checkout, you can get 15% off any pair that you want. Just go to blueblocks.com, that's BLUBLOX.com, and enter code SuperHuman to save 15%. All right, let's get back to the episode. So do you predominantly shop organic year-round?
I do. Yeah. I mean, it was a little bit tough during the peak of the coronavirus here in New York because some organic produce just was not available. So then I usually default to avoiding the dirty dozen and choosing selectively the clean 15, as the environmental working group says, the type of produce that is least laden with pesticide, that you can, that has a thick skin that you can, just peel off and then eat the inside. So just being selective, but otherwise year round I'm shopping organic. Yeah. Or directly from the farmer when I can.
Really smart. And I know there are delivery services all over the world. We have them here in Israel as well, where it doesn't have to be an expensive trip to Whole Foods. I mean, you really can order direct, cut out the middleman, and some, farmer's assistant will bring a box to your doorstep once a week.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really great. And I know there's an organic farm that is not right now coming to Manhattan, but is going to start doing that again. And what they were doing to kind of solve the issue of social isolation and whatnot is, instead of you being able to pick your produce, they were just creating, like you said, produce boxes or bags that you just pick up. And the great thing about that, I think, if you can become part of a CSA is that you might, everybody gets habitual on the types of produce that you buy, but when someone, when you're supporting an organic farm, you're getting whatever is the freshest at the time. And a lot of times that also gives you variety on what you would normally eat, because maybe you wouldn't select that. Because we're all habitual and we tend to shop around, we kind of get into our kind of little box of what 100%. We like to buy. But it's nice. And recently I did a service that delivered to the door, and it was really nice to just cook with vegetables that normally I might not buy, but they were all organic. They were coming straight from farms, supporting local farmers. So, I feel good about that, because I feel like we need to support our organic farmers.
Absolutely. Now, believe it or not, this is the first time I've heard the term the dirty dozen and the clean 15. Tell me more about that.
Oh, yeah. So every year, the Environmental Working Group puts out a list of what they consider the dirty dozen is the 12 vegetables and fruit that are most contaminated with pesticide, to the point that you can't wash it off. Usually on the top of that list are things like apples, strawberries are there. Anything that has a thin skin is going to be more susceptible. Then the clean 15 is a list of the fruit and vegetables that they have found to test to have the lowest amount of pesticide. Now, they're not looking at organic produce. They're looking at produce that is grown conventionally. Mm-hmm. And so this is not going to be pesticide free, but it's looking at basically what is the worst evil and what is the lesser evil here. If you are on a budget and you need to choose how you're going to spend your money, because organic can be sometimes a little more expensive. So being able to choose wisely and know that, because either you spend the money now or you spend it later on your health when you're sick.
Right. Let's see. I do see here the dirty dozen and the clean 15. This is really, really cool. I love when I just discover holes in my knowledge. I'm
glad I brought that to your. I'm glad I brought it.
It's amazing to me after almost 300 episodes that I can discover. So the dirty dozen list right now includes strawberries, spinach, kale, nectarines, apples, grapes, peaches, cherries, pears, tomatoes, celery, and potatoes. And then the clean 15, avocados, sweet corn, pineapple, things with thick skins, onions, papaya, sweet peas, eggplants, asparagus, cauliflower, cantaloupes, broccoli, mushroom, cabbage, honeydew melon, and kiwi. And I think we can probably put that in the show notes for people who
That's
didn't
really
catch
cool,
all
right?
of that. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's really cool to know. And I learned recently that sweet corn and that sweet corn is not genetically modified. So when we think of genetically modified corn, that does not include sweet corn.
Interesting. What are some other things you do, Dr. Pedre, to take care of your microbiome? You talked about probiotics. I recently went to a doctor. It was actually a gastroenterologist. And I said, well, I take probiotics. And she said, well, then you're just throwing money away. But it sounds like you're actually in favor of probiotics. So I want to get some clarity on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of patients over the years, and from my own fascination with the gut and what I felt was a mystery for so long, and then just becoming so fascinated with it, started working with patients with gut health problems, more just out of fun. Wasn't like I was deciding that I wanted to be a gut health expert. I was just doing it because I enjoyed it, but they, one got better and they would refer a friend would refer another friend. And before I knew it, like a big portion of my practice was all gut health. And so I've used probiotics a lot over the years, and I've seen what they can do for people who come in with clearly gut disorder or a gut-related condition, for example, like eczema, like severe eczema on the skin. The skin is just a reflection of the inside. So a lot of times what you see on the skin is what's happening in the gut. And I've used all different types of probiotics, multi-strain, really high-dose probiotics. We know that in inflammatory bowel disease that studies have shown that using upwards of 400 billion CFU, that's the strength of the probiotic concentration, can help reverse an exacerbation of ulcerative colitis or even prevent that. I've used it in patients who have had their colons out and they have what they call a J pouch as a way to rebalance the gut microbiome. So there are studies showing that probiotics do help. The thing with probiotics is they create a transient residence in the gut. So they're not permanent residents, but it seems like what I was saying before is even if you're just taking a certain number of strains, they communicate and interact with other bacteria in their gut, and they have this ability to regulate and balance the other bacteria in the gut. And especially, another example is patients who have come in with yeast overgrowth or chronic candida or chronic yeast issues. I find that to heal them, you need to use a probiotic. And I just have the empiric evidence over the years that I see patients get better that way. And of course, when we're doing that, I'm also talking about changing the diet, improving the diet. We're working on improving the gut border, the leaky gut, and reducing stress also, because stress can affect the makeup of your gut microbiome and the leakiness or permeability of the gut wall.
Interesting. Any that you particularly care for or trust more than others?
I've been using, I'll say there's certain groups of companies that I use to make within my practice. I've used Douglas Labs, Pure Encapsulations, Orthomolecular Products. I also have a probiotic that I've designed that's under the Happy Gut line. And then I have another probiotic that I designed in conjunction with a company that I'm Chief Medical Officer, United Naturals, and that one is Symbiotic 365. And I find that they serve, depending on the person, they can serve different purposes. It's not always one size fits all. Mm-hmm. And what I tell people is you cannot put the word probiotic under an umbrella and say that now you've spoken about every probiotic out on the market.
Right.
If one doesn't work for you, it could just mean that one isn't the right one for you, but maybe there's another one that would actually work quite well.
That makes perfect sense. What's a good framework for people? I mean, is this something people should really reach out to their functional medicine doctor about, or is there a framework where people should know, how should they know if a probiotic is right for them? What are kind of the symptoms?
Yeah, some of the things that people will see is, let's say they tend to suffer from constipation and they start taking a probiotic and now they're becoming much more regular. So that's an example. Or their stools tend to be loose and then you take a probiotic and the stools start to look more normal. So you're looking for a change towards what we would consider the normal, like better stool quality, regularity, diminishing abdominal pain. With some of the probiotics, we can't claim with symbiotic that it treats anything. But we've had a lot of reports from people with acid reflux symptoms get better taking the probiotic and just reporting that their stomach feels better. But, it varies from person to person. It's user dependent. And I'm always teaching that it's not just the probiotic. It's, if you want to heal your gut, or if you want to heal anything in your body that might be gut related, which is pretty much so many things, allergies, asthma, migraines, brain health, lung health, immune system, all of that is gut related. You really have to use a comprehensive approach.
Yeah, it definitely sounds that way. Dr. Pedre, what are some of the other things that you do to keep yourself performing at superhuman levels, especially these days?
Yeah, I have to say, John, that I really have enjoyed this self-isolation quarantine because it's allowed me to go back and really solidify some of the habits that I've developed ever since I was in my 20s. And part of that is really getting back into meditation and yoga. And I've been exploring. So now I have a routine that I do. It's Kundalini breath work for the spine. So it involves breath with movement at all different levels of the spine. And then I follow that with a heart-centered, calming breath where you actually put one hand on your heart and the other hand in what is called the Yan Mudra, where your thumb and index finger are together in a circle and your other three fingers are straight, and it's just you're holding your hand up right by your side. And usually what I do there is with my hand over my heart, so I've done the Kundalini breath work, kind of opened up my body, opened up the energy channels, and then I like to sit in meditation. And the focus, because the hand is on the heart, is on gratitude and just what I am thankful for. On the other side, besides, so that's kind of more my calming morning routine. Since the gyms are closed, I'm going on runs, and then usually I get back and I'm doing my breakfast, which might be granola with a bunch of nuts and seeds, and I've been drinking matcha green tea every day, organic, because the bioflavonoids in green tea have a beneficial effect on boosting the body's ability to fight off a virus.
Interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah. The green tea bioflavonoids act as, and quercetin also, which is another bioflavonoid, act as a zinc ionophore. So they basically help push zinc into cells. And we all know zinc, there's a lot of research studies on zinc and its ability to help the body fight off viruses. Plus zinc is a very important cofactor in a lot of things, including testosterone production and antibody production. So I'm taking zinc daily, and I'm also drinking a matcha tea every day, which interestingly, the other thing that I've been working on is, and I'm not like a sugar addict, but if I was between sweet and savory, I'm probably split in the middle, but sometimes tending more towards the sweet. But I was really interesting when I first started making the matcha. I felt it was too bitter for me, and I was adding a touch of honey. I was using Manuka honey, which for the people who know, Manuka honey has a lot of antimicrobial benefits. But now I don't make it with any honey. So I've kind of really, over the course of the last couple of weeks, detoxed myself from needing sugar or sweet.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, Dr. Pedre, we've pretty much come up on time here. I do want to give you an opportunity to let people know where they can reach out and learn more. I understand you've got some interesting cleanse challenges that you are offering on your website. Where can people learn more about you and get engaged with all the work you're doing?
Yeah, the website is happygutlife.com, where we have a 28-day cleanse, which is our kind of deeper, we call it a reboot, but we're going to have a 7-day cleanse, which is our mini cleanse, being relaunched, because it used to exist, but now it's kind of being more formalized into a program, and we call that a reset. So 7-day reset, and we've already had a couple of people that we've tested it on, including a patient of mine who had COVID-19 and recovered, and after he recovered, he did the 7-day reset, and he feels better than ever. He's back to, he wasn't exercising, now he's exercising, he's lost weight, his mind is clear. So all these things are going to be either on, or they will be on happygutlife.com. And then, of course, I'm very active on Instagram at Dr. Pedre, constantly posting useful infographics that people can share, save, reference back to. I know if you look back on my Instagram, I do have the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 somewhere down the list there. But that updates you for anyone who's listening. Every year, the Environmental Working Group reevaluates it and reposts the list. So they're constantly checking to see if it's still accurate.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, Dr. Pedre, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom and your time with us. I certainly enjoyed it, and my audience, I'm sure, will as well. Before I let you go, I want to ask you the one question I always ask, which is, if people take away one big message from this episode and they carry it with them for the rest of their lives, what would you hope for that to be?
I think what it would be is to understand that the gut is your foundation, is the foundation of your health. And if you were going to build a house, you would not build it on a shaky foundation. So if you are building your health, you have to build it on a strong foundation, and that foundation is strong gut health. So really, in my opinion, any health endeavor has to start with fortifying the gut, and from there you can expand.
Fantastic words to end on. Dr. Vincent Pedre, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was an absolute blast.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you again for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the award-winning SuperHuman Academy podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit superhuman.blog. While you're at it, please take a moment to share this episode with a friend and leave us a review on iTunes. We'll see you next week.